We're going to get started. I know we have people who are still jumping in right now, but we'll continue to let them in and they can kind of catch up. So I'm Lois Buckner, and I'm the founder and CEO of LB Talent Solutions. And this is our kickoff event, but I started this virtual roundtable series on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging to give back to the cause. And also, I wanted to find a way to share and amplify stories and ideas that are going to help us as individuals and as organizations do a better job in this realm. I've been talking to a lot of people in my network who have amazing stories to share and amazing ideas of how they're making real impacts in their organizations and in society. So I wanted to be able to share those stories more widely. We are very informal here, and so I'm going to be your host today. And just a quick thing about my organization. So I help individuals with career coaching and personal branding, and also do keynote speaking engagements, presentations, and workshops for a lot of associations and conferences around anything leadership development, change management, diversity and inclusion, and personal growth. So like I said, I started these virtual roundtables because I'm extremely passionate about this topic and lucky enough to be surrounded by amazing people who also are passionate about this topic. So I've obviously been having lots of these deep conversations around recent events that I thought, wow, why not spread this passion and these insights further? So here we are. This series of roundtables is meant for us to have completely candid, impromptu, and authentic conversations. So there's no planned questions from me. The only thing that our guests got just yesterday were a few of you sent in questions ahead of time. So I did share those with them to make sure you get what you want out of our conversation today. But otherwise, I planned no questions, and they don't have a script, and there's no formal presentation for anyone today. So we want to, just going through my list here. We're just real people talking about some real things. So I'm excited to be joined today by an esteemed panel of guests who will introduce themselves shortly. But first, a few logistics. So I'm going to be putting this into the chat box, but there are only 3 rules for today. So the first one is be respectful and open-minded regardless of your perspectives and opinions, as we are all here to learn and to unlearn. Number 2 is be unapologetically candid, because if we're going to meet our goal of learning and unlearning, we need to have some real authentic conversations. And the third rule is I hope you all have some fun and let your passion on this topic spill out. It's a safe space. All participants will be muted until the very end, except for our guests. However, we encourage everyone to participate along with us using the chat feature in Zoom. So at the very bottom of your toolbar, there should be a button that says chat. Please participate along. I totally encourage back channeling. So you can start your own conversations there, join in on the conversation. I'll also be monitoring for any questions that you have for our guests today. So today's topic, as you know, is very general. So anything and everything goes as it relates to diversity and inclusion. So if you're excited and ready to get started, type a heck yes into the chat box for me. There we go. Awesome. Well, let's start with introducing our brilliant, talented, and rock star guests. I am a huge fangirl of each and every one of them and the great work and passion that they exude on this topic. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. Morgan, do you want to start?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm Morgan Williams. I have been working in the tech and financial service space for the last almost 10 years. I'm joining you from Michigan today, but I actually live in Columbia, and I've been there for 2 years. So happy to share my experiences with you all. Nice to meet everyone.
Awesome. Loren?
Hi, everybody. I am Loren Tardi. Really excited to be a part of this. I know when Lotus reached out a couple weeks ago, really passionate about this conversation. I'm excited to have this roundtable format and just hear from, especially with Morgan, Ben, and Brian, a lot of different experiences. So it's going to be a really great session.
Awesome, Brian.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Stevens. I have been in the consumer packaged goods industry for almost 10 years, and I am joining you all from Chicago, the Windy City. So looking forward to engaging with you all.
Thanks, Brian. And Ben.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. Ben Cardenas. I am in the training and development space for a little over 10 years now. Financial services and environmental services. Super excited to be here, learn, contribute, and just really just learn about everyone's passion and everyone's story. So thank you for being here and thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'll get us kind of started here. So obviously there's a lot of momentum that we don't want to lose right now, right? And it's unfortunate that that momentum happened because somebody's life had to be taken in order for us to get to where we are right now. But there's been a string of Black Americans killed at the hands of police just in 2020 alone, right? We're in the last year alone. We're talking about George Floyd, which everyone obviously has heard about, but there's also Breonna Taylor, there's Ahmaud Arbery, there's Rayshard Brooks. And this is only a few of examples. And the Washington Post reports that 107 Black Americans shot and killed by police just in 2020 alone already, which isn't even over. The year's not over. And this does not include our long-standing history of violence against Black Americans like Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Laquan McDonald, Michael Brown, Eric Garner. This is in addition, right, to other race-based incidences that have made the headlines as well, like Amy Cooper in New York, who called the cops on Christian Cooper. They have no relation, by the way. And she reported that a Black man was harassing her, knowing what that meant, and he was just bird watching. So my question to all of you is, how have these events impacted you personally and professionally? And what has changed for you, both in your life as well as what's changed for work for you, if anything? Anyone can jump in.
So, hey Lotus, Ben here. So I guess personally, you know, over the years, I've grown a group of diverse network and friends. But recently, personally, I've made it a point to really just educate myself even more and understand the statistics around the police brutality, right? I've even recently just ignited a passion to bring awareness to this topic and really talk about it, right? And not just talk about the numbers, but the behaviors, right, behind what is it that we can do to make a difference, to bring awareness to this, especially at work, right? I started to have conversations with people at work around this, and these are conversations that I think people are uncomfortable to have because we're not well aware of the subject. We're not well educated on it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that there's something wrong if you choose not to educate yourself or be involved with it, right? And so that's why I've really pushed myself to say, get more involved, educate yourself more, and bring these conversations, even though it might make you uncomfortable to know that the person you're talking to might be uncomfortable, but at least it gives the opportunity, opens the door to say, hey, this is real and it's not going away, and in order for us to fix it, we got to talk about it.
Awesome, I love that. I think that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to start these roundtable discussions too, right? Because you're absolutely right. If we don't talk about it, we're not even taking that first step. Brian, I know that you and I had talked kind of right as a lot of these events had been spurring some attention in the media, and your organization did a whole week of events. Can you talk a little bit about what's changed for you?
Sure. So within my organization, we've got employee resource groups like probably many companies do. And we've had this structure stood up for a number of years. So I have the privilege of helping to lead our regional Black employee resource group within our company. And the task and charge that I've had for the last couple of months has been, let's continue to have conversations and let's be a part of conversations that are happening to help drive an internal culture that brings awareness to issues, helps to remove biases, helps to ultimately just inform those who are unaware about the things that ultimately impact the Black community as a whole. And over the last probably 2 months or so, I've been in more meetings and more conversations than I can probably count in the almost 10 years that I've been with the company, engaging on topics that are specific to people that look like me, and on topics that normally we would be having outside of that, maybe on a phone call with friends, or having a conversation with my parents, or talking to my dad about his experiences in the 60s and 70s. And we've had opportunities to have conversations like that in the workplace. And it's been a very, I don't know how you describe it, but it's been a very catch you in the moment type of experience, where you're literally engaging in topics that you would have never thought to bring to work, and trying to tell people about things that you've lived or experienced, or have friends or family members that have lived and experienced, and you're bringing it to the conscious of someone that has never even fathomed what someone may have experienced or gone through. So it's been a very, very eye-opening experience. But with that comes, in a sense, the burden of feeling like, well, darn, I'm still talking about stuff that's been going on for years, and it's not new to many of us. It's just that it's been amplified, and that it's made the news, and it's in the news cycle. So the things that folks were living and maybe experiencing some form of trauma for when they would go in the news cycle and go away, some folks are constantly getting that reminder that things are still the same in a lot of ways, and there hasn't been the change that folks would have hoped for. And that's really just how it's shown up at work. So we're continuing to talk about it, and we are committed to continuing to have conversations in different areas, and initiatives are being spurred based off of things that the company thinks that they can do to address these issues and continue to bring that conversation to the forefront in various different ways, and ways that they can tackle it.
So I'm curious, you had mentioned that, a lot of people have been surprised by the experiences, and, it's things that they haven't experienced themselves. How has the response been at your company starting to have these conversations? Or is it making people uncomfortable? Is it a positive response that you're getting? Are there challenges?
I've heard from a number of different people at this point. It kind of falls into 3 different buckets, I think. You have some folks that are hearing it and it's like, dang, that's messed up. Then you've got folks that are like, all right, I've heard enough of this. I've heard a lot. We've talked so much about this that we're not talking about business anymore, or it doesn't seem like we're talking about business as much as we were prior to all of these things happening. Still with the thought of mine of, this is very sad, these are things that are happening, it's enraging for people, but okay, we've talked a lot about this area, but we're not talking as much about business at this point. And then I've had a really, really gratifying experience with a coworker that I've worked with for a number of years, who we talk and have conversations all the time. And you know how you have a conversation with someone at work and it's, more surface level. You're not talking about anything that's really deep. It's just, hey, I care about you, you care about me, and I want to know that you're doing okay. Well, we finally had a chance to have a conversation about my experience and things that I've seen or been around. And the comment back to me was, I've got to apologize to you that I have never tried to acknowledge or look at you in a way to acknowledge that you're different because of your race. And based off of that, I've got to apologize to you because I've never really taken the time to think about how your experience might be different from mine. And this was a white woman, same age as I am, I'm 33. And it was, I have to apologize to you because I've, for the most part, tried to dance around it and act like it didn't exist, that there was a difference. So in that, if I've been tone deaf in any way, if I've made a comment that's been out of the way or something that was insensitive based on me not wanting to engage and understand, and in a sense having, let's say, the privilege to not even think about some of these things, I wanted to apologize to you. And I'm now committed to wanting to learn and engage as best as I can to learn the things that impact you that are different, and then just be more aware of the differences that all people have and how those things show up at work and how they show up in your personal life, and how the things that you may experience when you leave from the walls of work may be different than what I might experience as I walk down the street or go into a store or anything like that I've never even taken the chance to think about. So it's probably been the best experience that I've had, and it's been an ongoing conversation with this person, and they're now stepping up to the plate and saying, how can I do more? How can I be involved in this employee resource group and bring programming or be involved in leading programming that may help people that look like me understand the things that I'm learning and uncovering for myself now. It's been a really great experience in that realm.
I love that. I think that, you know, the work that you all have done in your organization, as well as many others, is opening up an opportunity for people to become more authentic allies. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Along those similar lines, maybe Morgan and Loren, you can jump in here. We got a question from Carissa, and her question is, if our companies are not making any diversity and inclusion efforts, how can we support the cause? I lied, that's from Carol. But do you have any thoughts on what we can do as individuals if we feel like our organizations are not doing anything about this?
Yeah, I definitely think so. When I was working at an organization about 2 years ago, and I was working within fintech, and in Chicago, and there was just very few Black people in the organization. There was about 200 of us in the office of people in general. And then of Black people, we had one Black engineer, one Black person on our finance team, which was me. And then we had one Black person on our sales team. And we didn't have any Latinos, and we barely had any Asians, right? And so we, you know, as diverse people identified that, and we went to our GM and said, hey, we've discovered that there's just no diversity here. And especially when you're thinking about tech, which is an industry that has even a large Asian population, we said, we don't even see that here. Where is the diversity? It's just white men. And our CTO was actually Cuban, or it's not CTO, sorry, GM. He was Cuban. And so, you know, I'm like, hey, you have to have understood this. You have to have seen this, you know? And so he was very open to hearing us and seeing how we could establish, you know, ERGs. And so that's kind of where our ERGs started to come out within this organization, simply because we raised our voices, and we raised our voices to leadership. And it was more like asking, you know, not necessarily accusatory, but more of asking, what are we doing? What are your plans? How do we serve our clients well if we don't have the diversity here that's building our products? So yeah, so I think as individuals, it's really on us, you know, if we see something, say something. And I would do it, you know, in the leadership capacity.
I love that. Thank you. Lauren, I see you're about to say something.
Yeah. Morgan, that was great. I saw Rachel actually just prompted me to talk about this, but I loved what she said in the chat about how do you change from it being a check the box activity and really enacting true, equitable, and inclusive policies. I think that's so important too. And lots of companies, whether you have ERGs, you have inclusive diversity departments in place, I think it's really important to have those conversations, just what Morgan was alluding to, internally as teams too. I think sometimes we'll see, I've seen inclusive diversity where it's an exercise. And I know one of the things that we've been really working on at work too is creating a culture where we're talking about this, you're uncovering what are those unconscious biases. And it really comes from, I think, from the top down, but also the bottom up in those regards, to have these conversations and how do we ingrain this within our culture. But I love that. I saw that in the chat with Rachel, so I just wanted to bring that, but I think that's really important whenever you're thinking about anything from a diversity standpoint. If you have something in place, but how do you really change that momentum?
I'm gonna stick with you for a second, Lauren, because being in HR, I thought this question was a really good question that Felipe brought up. And he said, there's a skills and experience gap between people of color and mostly white men population in the workforce. It's difficult to hire someone of color when there is a white candidate with more experience, education, and skill sets. I recently saw this come to fruition when a white male was chosen for a position over an African American female. She was qualified, but he was way qualified. No one could argue with the choice the hiring manager made. Seems like this is a challenge since no one wants to settle for less. Even when people of color upskill through education, there will always be a white person with more experience since white men have dominated the business landscape for so long. How do we get past this hurdle?
It's a big question. I think, and I know you sent that to us, Lotus, I think what's really important, and I come from a talent acquisition and recruiting background as well, but I think one of the things that I have seen work really well, every company is working with, how do we also recruit talent? Morgan spoke to this earlier in IT, there is a shortage of diverse talent, and how do we begin to look at that? One of the things that I know that we're doing, I work at Allstate, but from a recruiting standpoint, is we're really looking at the sourcing of candidates and really ensuring that we have, if you look at your candidate pool, that you have also candidates that are diverse, that you aren't moving forward until you've sourced, you've networked, you've gotten referrals, but really having that, again, it goes to moving from that check the box activity to ingraining in your culture. But how do we make sure that we're partnering with organizations where, and I'm in the Chicagoland area, there's many organizations that we can partner with, but I think that's really critical, is thinking, what's your sourcing as well? And I have coming from that sourcing background as well, but the sourcing is also so critical. Building relationships, building partnerships as well. And you will find top talent with that too. And you're going to have people with all different skill sets, but also I think sometimes we need to look at roles. I know I was speaking with a senior leader a little bit ago, and we were also talking about how do we get people ready and prepared for next steps. I think sometimes we look at job descriptions and we think, okay, there are 20 line items here. We have to have someone that checks every single one. What's really critical for that role? But then also, how do you look at your internal talent? And how do you create development for those individuals to get to those positions? Because you will see when you get to certain leadership levels in organizations that your diversity drops off substantially. So how do you create programs in place also for your internal talent so that you're developing and you have the best of the best going into those roles? I know for us, we have lots of talent, and it's our jobs too to help develop them.
So those are awesome ideas that people can take back to their organizations. I saw in the chat a few people asked, are any of you, so Loren, maybe with all the programs you had just talked about, how are you guys measuring that? So the question is, are any of your organizations using certain metrics to measure your success with diversity and inclusion efforts?
Yeah, we have plenty of metrics in place. And I know a big part of that, something that we're going through right now, is just even thinking about succession planning. So a big part of that is looking at our diverse talent pool for that. And from that, we've created internally programs that may be towards women and people of color, or we're looking at specific programs to build to really help different groups within the organization. So we're looking at those metrics across the board, and where are we lacking? I saw that Jackie also had a really great point on partnering with your ERGs internally. This is a great way to get that talent and talking with them. We have plenty of ERGs, I know, at our company where they're involved with the hiring, they're helping with referrals, they're helping with sourcing, they're helping to also build programs. And that's a big part of it. But from the measurement piece, there's anything from your succession planning. What does your pipeline look like? So if you look at your senior leadership, who's in that pipeline for succession? If it's lacking, something needs to be done, whether it's development, it's identification, it's having those conversations with other leaders to identify top talent that could go into that. It's also looking at your recruiting. So if we have new grad programs, for example, that come in, we really want to look at the diversity of those programs too, and we want to make sure that we have diversity across the board within that. We're constantly measuring who's coming into the organization, also looking at your retention. That's a big piece of it too. So if you're finding that you have a group that's leaving the organization, what maybe is happening internally that you need to be measuring and what you need to be talking about with that. A couple other ideas too is just looking at employee engagement. So how do employees feel about just how those conversations are going, the diversity of the organization. So that engagement piece is really important as well.
Awesome. Anyone else have any thoughts on measurement?
Hey, Lotus, not measurement, but I wanted to comment a little bit on some of the points that were being brought up. First and foremost, going back to Rachel's comment with, the not making sure that you're checking off the box. I really think that it's important to, focus on the behaviors, and I guess that led to the comment that Loren was also talking about with diversifying your talent pool. I was having a conversation with a colleague just a few days ago around how do you diversify your talent pool, and I think one of the things that popped in my mind is diversifying your job descriptions, where you're welcoming minorities, right, and not always focusing on a job description that's traditional, if you will. For example, there's minorities that don't have the opportunity to educate in the traditional sense of going to college right out of high school due to finances or cultural differences or influences, if you will. So what I've experienced a lot is that you look at job descriptions that focus primarily on that education piece, and then it intimidates people from minority groups to say, well, I'm not good enough for that position. And I think it's important nowadays for organizations to diversify the job description. Not saying necessarily you settled for less, but you're welcoming a diverse talent pool where you now get to measure and average out the technical skill, right? Because you might have someone that doesn't have a college degree yet and has incredible life experiences and technical skills or certifications that they've done in order to validate that skill compared to someone that has that college education. Not degrading any of the sense, but again, to me, that really helps diversify that talent pool. It's just diversifying those job descriptions and not focusing on such traditional sense of education first versus life experience, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, thank you.
Lotus?
Yeah.
I just thought of something. Ben, that was so great, looking at the job descriptions. There are ways that you can internally, I know that there are programs, even the words that you choose in your job description. There are certain roles that may attract more men than they do women, for example. So really taking a look at your job description. I know that a couple years ago, we actually did an audit just on what words are in the job description, because there's been scientific research around there that actually shows these certain words may attract this type of person or this type of person. So how do you really make that neutral? Or how do you, to Ben's point, how do you look at the actual requirements? What's truly needed, the knowledge, skills, and abilities for the job? But Ben, I thought that was such a great point.
Bernadette just brought up a really good point too in the chat, if anyone's following. If you don't recruit at HBCUs, there's an issue. And her other idea was, what about taking out names of candidates when you're sending the resumes over to the hiring managers? So blind screening could certainly be helpful in that situation too. I want to get to a question. Morgan, this is kind of in your wheelhouse. I saw a few tech people here, and they're asking, in the tech and financial sectors, it's been a challenge. They get a lot more white candidates. How can they diversify their recruiting efforts within that sector that is very homogenous?
Yeah, definitely. I think to Bernadette's point, you can partner and you should partner with HBCUs. However, Black people don't only go to HBCUs. And I think that was one of the things that I was suggesting to even my previous company about recruitment, because I went to the University of Michigan and there were quite a few Black people at the University of Michigan, like University of Illinois. There's tons of Black candidates, and you rarely find companies that come to those universities and just look for Black talent. I can recall 2 companies that came to our business school that were looking specifically for Black students. And so I hear so much about, again, the HBCUs, and don't get me wrong, absolutely that is, and you should definitely strategically partner with those universities. But within, predominantly white universities, there are still a ton of Black and Latino candidates. And in fact, at those predominantly white universities, you have a group of Black people who, maybe don't have the means to go to HBCU, right? Because if I think about Michigan, it was more affordable for me because it was a public university than if I had gone to HBCU. Right. So just kind of keeping an open mind that there are other Black students outside of HBCUs, and that we have our own organizations, you know, that you can strategically partner with. I think the other thing is, I think Loren mentioned this about kind of working with ERGs and really trying to have them be a part of the process. I know for me, before, you know, we had an ERG, we were trying to figure this out. And at that time, this organization called Blavity, I'm sure a lot of you probably heard of it, was just coming up with their first ever Afrotech. And I had just heard about this. And so I told my organization, I was like, hey, this is gonna be an opportunity where a lot of Black people who are interested in tech are gonna be at, and I think we have to be there. And so, you know, my organization was like, all right, you're the expert in this, you got it, we'll be there, what do you need? You know, and so we, you know, went out with a bang. We kind of designed these shirts that said, make tech more Black. And, you know, the next year, everyone was asking for these shirts, and we were more involved, and we were able to bring in a lot more candidates from an engineering and operations standpoint. So I would just suggest that, again, really think about how you want to tackle diversity and inclusion, and really think about how you can leverage your internal resources. Because I do think, again, for me, I have the resources and connections at the University of Michigan for Black students. So I can, you know, easily build that bridge for my organization to kind of reach out to those students, right? I'm also very tapped into the Black community. So I know the different events that are happening. So again, leverage that information. Now, what I'll say is that is a lot of work, right, for a person of color, not only to do your job, but also have to do the job of diversity and inclusion. But I guess you have to start somewhere. And so I definitely suggest, you know, if you have no clue, it's better to ask your diverse talent, you know, what makes sense to kind of really have, you know, a Black voice or a Latino voice involved in the process.
Hey, Lotus, can I jump in on that as well?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've just had a conversation about in this series of ongoing conversations, and it's been if the company identifies that, hey, we don't have an issue with recruiting Black talent, just saying Black for purposes of this conversation, we have more of an issue of retention of these Black employees. Once they get in the door, are they staying? And if they're not staying, why are they not staying? Are they leaving due to a lack of opportunity? Are they leaving due to other things that are showing up within culture, that they don't feel welcome? They don't feel like there's someone that's helping them come along in the opportunity. When you look around, if you're seeing that your peers that you're start with at the same time are getting opportunities prior to you even getting a chance to show what you can do, and you're seeing people, someone mentioned it before, getting promoted based off of potential, or getting an opportunity to develop based off of potential, and you're not seeing that, folks are quickly going to say, well, there's the door. Let me go ahead and go somewhere else where I feel like I can get that experience and that development that I'm looking for, so that I can raise up to these senior level positions and to the C-suite if those are the aspirations. So if the problem is not the recruiting, and it's more so once you're in the organization and you're not getting that equal opportunity, you don't feel, then what does a company do to ensure that you've got that after they're there? How do you nurture and continue on that journey? So a few of the things that we've thought through, or we're thinking through now, is how do we create specific programs that say, or specific initiatives that say, let's ensure that folks are receiving mentorship. Let's ensure that folks are receiving partnership with folks that might be able to expose them to other things that they don't otherwise see. Because we know that those opportunities and those relationships are existing with other people that don't look like us. And some of the sad parts about it are you don't even realize that it's happening until you hear that you weren't a part of it. And you find out from someone that's raised up into a senior level position that, oh yeah, I had someone that was helping me out from a skill set perspective on how to go and present myself in this meeting, or how to present a specific business problem that would be go over in a very, very effective way. If your dad is a senior level person at a company and he has overplay with your company, he's got specific insights that he can give you that says, oh yeah, you need to show up like this, say this, think about it that way, ask this specific question, or just drop some type of knowledge based on what's been given to you. And if you're looking at that pipeline, if many of us don't have family members or people that we're connected to that can give you, let's say, give you the game, then you're not going to have that going in. So you're already starting a few feet backwards from someone that's walking in the door at the exact same spot. And while you're thinking you've got the same opportunity, you don't. So if you end up being one of those people that goes on further, it's due to some stuff that you've learned or someone taking a chance and saying, let me partner with you, let me provide some mentorship for you, and I can help you to get along your journey that you're looking for. So sponsorship is key. And it really is the difference between someone coming through the door and saying, yep, we've met that number, or we felt like we've done a good job in bringing in, let's say, Black talent. But if they're not going anywhere and they're continuing to leave, then you're not really solving your problem. You're just bringing in more people for them to leave. And it doesn't really do anything for that pipeline and getting folks into those senior level positions.
I think just to kind of piggyback off of Brian, I think what's really, really important is that this has to be a priority for leadership. Like in a tech space, things move super fast. And like, I love this concept of mentors, having mentors and sponsorship, but like these don't exist in like these smaller, fast moving organizations. And so the only way really that, you know, you can get like this being to be prioritized, to have mentors or to have sponsors or understand these gaps is to have this to be at the forefront of leadership. And I don't know how many leaders we have on the call, but I think it's really, really important that leaders are not only thinking about the business objectives, but also how like diversity and inclusion really helps meet those business objectives. Because like, as you said, you know, Black talent or Latino talent will leave, you know, if they don't feel like they're being, I don't know, if they have the opportunity to grow, be promoted, but I think really, really for leaders, it needs to be very much in your minds about this is important to me. This is a top priority. We have to get this done, and we're going to set aside prioritization in this, because otherwise, like I've worked at Discover Card, right? And then Discover Card, a big organization, we had this concept, right, of mentorship, sponsorship, but at Uber, at Braintree, this didn't exist. I mean, we didn't even have enough people to actually start to build something like that. So definitely it has to be, you know, a leadership priority.
Morgan, I want to take this opportunity to ask you, you have a global perspective, and sometimes I think we can get siloed into thinking, right, George Floyd happened in the US, this is a US issue, the momentum's here. But this is actually a lot broader. Can you kind of take this opportunity and share a little bit about your experiences on a global level and what issues you see are similar and what may be different or better or worse in other countries?
Yeah, so what I'll say is, you know, I was fighting so hard when I was at Braintree to really, you know, build our ERG and just really build, you know, our diversity and equity program. And I felt that it was quite difficult, but, you know, I was still able to make progress. Then coming to LATAM with Uber, you know, I found it to be really challenging. And I'll say that in a couple of ways. First of all, we had, you know, a Black ERG, and it was very US focused. It was like, we only talked about US problems. It was like Black people didn't exist outside of the US. And I've found that even to be, you know, a feeling even when I was at Braintree, but like this concept of Black people outside, no, we have Black American problems, and this is a Black American problem. But the reality is Black people are oppressed everywhere, even in Africa, where, you know, where we're at home. So I would say that Black, you know, having, you know, resources and having, you know, D&I programs is super important. But the problems in terms of the funnel are much more challenging. So I was working in Colombia where 25% of the population is Black, and it was just me at Uber. And not only in the office, right? Our office was super small. I think there was less than 100 people in our office, and it was just me. I mean, like, not just me, like visibly Black, like me as like anything that had some Black in her, right? Because when you're in LATAM, you know, you have a lot of diversity in terms of multiculturalism. And there was just nothing like that, right? And so then you go outside, which is kind of like our green lights, which would be our customer support. And so one of the challenges I had at Braintree was that our customer support was like all Black and Latino. That's where, you know, we said, okay, hey, we need diversity inclusion. Let's put more Black people in our customer support, right? And then you go to Colombia and there are no Black people even in our customer support. Even in like literally of thousands of people, not one. And so I think that's like really, it was a really big, you know, eye-opening experience for me. And so when I was working with our leaders, so there was only one other girl. Well, there was out of, I think, let's say 7 countries, there was 3 Black people that I can recall. One girl in Panama, me, and then another girl in Brazil, who were kind of like working on this diversity and inclusion effort. And so in Brazil, you know, you have more than 60% of the population Black, and again, still really struggling to have representation of Black people within our Uber office, even in those, again, like customer support like roles. So we were trying to strategize, how do we really tackle this problem? And one of the things that I found most difficult, particularly in Colombia, is the lack of cohesion of the Black community, right? Like, I think here in the US, we have a Black community, we have Black resources for Black people. And so with those resources and with our community, we're able to come together and then like work towards a specific effort. Whereas here, I didn't feel there was a lot of cohesion. Now, why is there a lot of disconnect in terms of like cohesion in the Black community? Well, one of the things that, again, that is very present in LATAM is this concept of multiculturalism. So, you know, someone from my skin tone down to Ben's skin tone, we could all be some version of Black, but we all have some right to say that we're not, if you will. And so like this lack of kind of like cohesion and this ability to kind of be not Black, but something different, I think made it very challenging to even know who Black people were, right? Like you can't, how do you target Black people if it's hard to identify who they are? And so then that was one problem. And then the other problem is in terms of the education system here. My understanding of the education system here is that like universities and like your ability to go to universities are very much about how much you can pay. And like, again, Black people, as I said, are very much oppressed everywhere. And so Black people are living in some of the poorest cities here in Colombia, some of the poorest cities in Brazil, and these people can't afford to go to the university. So you have like this very big gap, huge gap in terms of like where we want to be and where we are. And so I struggled with this a lot because I at least knew where to go, who to partner with, the universities, the different programs, you know, but I was struggling to understand like even where to start. And like in Panama, it's a little bit more cohesive in terms of the Black community. So there is a little bit more effort in terms of being able to kind of help funnel the diversity and inclusion there. But like I found it to be a really big challenge. And the last thing I'll say is that, you know, at Uber, obviously we had to talk a lot about diversity and inclusion just as a priority as an organization. And every time we talked about D&I from a LATAM standpoint, it was only about the LGBTQ community and women. Like they didn't say anything else about anything else when it came to, you know, the town halls or our all hand meetings. It was like very much like when we reported the diversity numbers, we excluded like racial diversity because we hadn't made essentially any progress. So I would say that, like, you know, having been here and now, you know, reflecting back on my experience in the US, I think that we are like very well positioned in the US to continue to, you know, have, you know, more diverse talent in our workplaces, very well positioned. And I don't want to take that for granted. I want to make it very clear that, like, as we struggle, the struggle is like very real outside of the US. I mean, most Black people they don't even know how to kind of get to this sort of like corporate world, right? So I would say that we definitely need to acknowledge the advances that we made in the US. And globally, I do think like organizations like Uber and, you know, global organizations need to really focus on making diversity a priority rather than just kind of understanding it's a challenge and trying to like sweep it under the rug, if you will.
Okay, wow. We should do a session just on that, Morgan. I think there's a lot of questions and comments in the chat, and I have lots of questions. And I think it's a huge topic because we do think in a US silo a lot, and business is changing. With COVID, we are in an online virtual world, and there's so many opportunities there for companies to really go global. And this is going to become a bigger issue beyond our borders. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective. We should definitely chat about doing a future session just on that. I do want to address a question here. Rachel's kudos to Morgan. She said really great points. How are we thinking about intersectionality and the implications of other experiences, and not just the practices, but the tracking and data to support and evaluate? So how, for any of you, feel free to jump in, but how has intersectionality played a role in the injustices and the biases and experiences that you've had in the workplace or in society in general?
I'll dive in a little bit to that. What I've seen in the workplace specifically is that there's been a focus more often than not coming from the ERGs. And the ERGs, although they're open to all people, obviously their intent and purpose, especially for the ethnically diverse ones, is to focus on the issues that are impacting the majority of that group. So we've got one that is largely for women in sales. And we've got our Black employee ERG, we've got our Latino Hispanic ERG. And what we try to do, which is usually ERG driven, is to provide content and programming that talk about that intersectionality. So you're talking about a Black woman, okay, that's a perfect opportunity for two ERGs to come together and provide content and training and programming around specific topics that impact being a Black person and being a woman, that not necessarily is addressed in overall broad discussions and things that the company is going to bring forward. And even society in large doesn't necessarily focus on some of these subsets, but that intersectionality shows up in those ways. And we can have further conversations to say, yes, these are the experiences that you have as a woman, but here are the experiences that you also have being Black. And then when you combine the two together, it creates a completely unique experience for someone as they navigate what it looks like in the workplace for them, then what it looks like when they leave work, and what those unique differences are for people as they encounter them. I just got off of a call prior to this one at work, more of a town hall discussion, and it talked about specifically folks' outlook on their opportunity to succeed at the company. And the statistics showed that Black women they scored at 26%, thought that they had an opportunity or an equal opportunity to succeed at the company. And you compared it to white men, white women, and Black males. Everyone else was around 50%, upper 40s, and Black women were at 26%. And it was an eye-opening statistic, but it wasn't anything new. So it further drilled down into saying, we've got to have conversations, we've got to think about the intersectionality and where different experiences converge, and how you have people who really have unique differences that need to be explored, and resources that are provided that help them uniquely to what they are going to experience when they go to work and when they leave outside of those walls.
And like, if I can add a comment to what Brian just said, I think it's like Brian stated, you know, the content and the resources are important, but I also think that the empowerment here is key with intersectionality, because especially the organizations that have the ERG groups, right? If you have ERG groups, you have a Black group, a Latino, women empowerment. How are you leveraging them and empowering them to take the charge in initiatives that impact the organization at large? You know, for example, are you going to use these groups to come together and lead forward a business transformation initiative that's going to put them in those leadership positions? And I think that's also another way to help measure, right? Because I think we get so stuck in the data, just my own personal opinion, we get so stuck in the data that brings awareness to it. And then we say, well, we created these ERG groups, what more do we want? Well, now what empowerment are you giving them to take the charge, to make decisions for the organization, right? Are you giving them empowerment to do community outreach? Are you giving them empowerment to help expand and strengthen your organizational brand in the Latino communities, in the gay communities, in the Black communities, right? It's not just about the data, in my opinion, or the resources. Give them the resources to educate, but the tools also to feel empowered and take the charge.
And the budget.
Yes.
Yes, put your money where your mouth is.
Because generally the ERG budget is super tiny and you can't do enough with it. So the budget too.
Yes.
Those are such good points. We sometimes see organizations, it's a lot of talk and not a lot of walk, right? So we see a lot of them, you know, creating or allowing for employee resource groups, which are often in most organizations voluntary, by the way. We're not even paying people. And now with the momentum that we have, a lot of organizations that I'm talking to are dealing with the fact that their minority communities, their minority ERGs feel like they're being asked to take on 10 times more of a workload than they had before, and it's voluntary. They're not being paid because they're doing this all on top of their job and outside of their work hours. So that's a really important thing that I think is important to call out for any leaders in the audience and organizations who have the ability to impact change. Pay your ERGs, empower them, and you know, really incorporate them into your organizations. Otherwise, it's not going to work, and it's going to be pretty obvious pretty quickly that you're just doing it for show. So those are really good points. We are getting close to the end of the time. I don't know how this hour flew by so fast, but I just got a message, so I wanted to take a quick second to define a couple terms that we talked about. That's my bad. We often, like in any industry, we use a lot of acronyms and we don't define them. So wanted to just define that really quickly. HBCUs, that's historically Black colleges and universities is what that stands for. ERGs are employee resource groups. They're also known by the names of business resource groups or BRGs or affinity groups. And so a lot of organizations have these employee-led groups, affinity groups that get together, and they do everything from planning educational resources, events, community outreach, anything to really increase the D&I efforts within that organization. And a lot of times you don't have to identify with that group to be a part of it. A lot of times allies are welcome, which I think they should be. So that's what those ones are. And did I miss one? I feel like I'm supposed to define 3. Oh, and then intersectionality. There's a question about what do we mean by intersectionality? So I think that might have been answered a little bit, hopefully, in the comments, but when we're talking about intersectionality, there are differences in experiences, not just based on your race or your identity with LGBTQ or your gender. Sometimes those things intersect, right? I'm an Asian female, and that experience is very different than, say, an Asian male. So just because we're both Asian doesn't mean that that experience is going to be exactly the same. So that's kind of what we were getting at there. And I did want to talk to you really quickly, Ben. Can you talk a little bit about how intersectionality has impacted you?
Sure. Absolutely. So I, as a proud Latino gay man, this is something that's impacted me a lot in my career, right? Especially, I guess, early on in my career, before I even came out and was comfortable with identifying as a gay man in the professional world. It intimidated me. It was scary because I felt that I would be looked upon as, we don't want him in the group. We don't want him leading charge, right? And, you know, it's scary. And it was also, it was impacting not just me, but also the groups that I impacted, because I wasn't speaking up, right? I wasn't talking about ideas that I had to help improve the organization. I wasn't sharing those ideas. I wasn't speaking up at meetings because I was afraid that the fact that I identified as a gay man, it was going to impact it, right? And it boils down to the comment I made just a few moments ago with the empowerment, right? Empower all of your people to feel proud and to contribute, because we all have so much to contribute in the world. Even now to this day, I'll be very honest, I'm very cautious when I meet people in the business world, or if I join a new organization, I'm very cautious with how I identify, and it shouldn't be that way. I shouldn't have to be cautious to say, yes, I have a husband at home and 2 beautiful daughters, or I shouldn't have to test the water and see how they're going to react if I use a word partner. And it's funny, I was having this conversation with my husband just a few days ago too, how I don't like using the word partner in the workplace to talk about my husband, because to me it's a business transaction. That's just my own personal take on it. And so being in the workplace, being gay, being Latino, I have to test those waters. And so, one of my goals in my workplace now is going to be to really start to bring more awareness to focusing on ERGs, right? Because I'm sure that there are other professionals within my organization that probably feel the way I felt 10 years ago, or probably still have to test the water a little bit before they raise their hand to say, hey, I want to take charge on this project, or here are some ideas that I want to share with you, but I won't because I'm afraid that you're going to judge me, or I'm afraid that because of the way that I identify, it's going to hold me back from contributing to the organization.
Thank you. All right, well, we are just about at time, so I want to take a quick minute. Morgan, Loren, Brian, Ben, I just want to thank you all so much for joining me today. This was not enough time, so 100% I would like to invite all of you back to talk about some more specific topics around diversity and inclusion. I've learned so much in just an hour with you, and I know our audience has too. I could not have chosen a better panel of guests to kick off this series with me, and I do hope you all will come back and join us for another session. Thank you all to the participants as well, all of you in the audience who participated in our session today. I'm in utter awe of the awesome engagement and all of your insights as well. I have to go back and read the chat because there's some really good back channeling conversations going on.